They mostly come out at night. Mostly.
Aliens.
Hey guys, Eli here. Back to review Aliens from 1986. I'm still nervous, just like I was about my Alien video, although it turned out okay, I think, minus my forgetting to mention the entire plot. Kind of important for a review, But I was super nervous because who dares to try and put words to art made by the gods themselves? I mean, I've stated many, many times over the years that Alien is my favorite of the franchise, and I think it always will be. But Aliens really isn't that far behind, I mean, it's a more muscular film, more bombastic, tons of testosterone. I mean, no matter what time of day you watch it, you will have a 5 o'clock shadow by the time it's over. So, after being in stasis at the end of the film, Ellen Ripley and her escape pod were found almost 60 years later, drifting aimlessly around space. Just her and Jonesy the cat, drifting around in, I always called it cryosleep. I think cryosleep might be a term from a different movie. I always thought that was the term from Alien, but I guess it's called stasis. I don't really remember that. So Ripley learns that the company has lost communication with the families that were sent to terraform LV-426, the same planet that had the ship containing the xenomorph eggs from the first film. And the company gives her an ultimatum to get her to go back to the planet as a consultant to the crew of Marines that plan on scoping things out. I mean, we all know how smart Ripley is, and she has no interest in going back to that fucking planet. Now, most sequels don't work for me, usually because of, and many times, a lazy plot. But here, it just works naturally. Ripley is absolutely furious with the company, and rightfully so. The company sent people to LV-426 despite being warned of the dangers there. And there are some changes this time around. Most importantly, James Cameron coming in to direct instead of Ridley Scott this time around. He was an up-and-coming director at the time, and he had seen success with the Terminator in 1984. That turned out to be a pretty big deal. It's a classic to this day. And the reason this sequel took so long to make was because of a lawsuit between Brandywine and Fox due to some shady-ass lying about profits from the first film, lying on Fox's end. They had actually told Brandywine that Alien, they actually lost money on Alien, and it just simply fucking wasn't true. And we also had Cameron writing the script along with David Giler and Walter Hill, who had writing credits on Alien. So no Dan O'Bannon or Ronald Shusett here. And just like with Alien, we get a great cast here, chock full of great and memorable characters. Sigourney Weaver was hesitant to return for this one, actually. She did like Cameron's script, but she wanted to be sure that this wasn't just a typical corporate cash grab. And this just makes me love her even more, a true artist. Cameron brought along Bill Paxton, Lance Henriksen, and Michael Biehn, since he worked with them on The Terminator. Paxton was worried that people would not like his character, and Henriksen didn't think that his acting chops would be on par with Ian Holm and Rutger Hauer, who had given masterful performances playing android characters recently, around this time, I should say. His Bishop character is my personal favorite android of the franchise, and I think that says a lot. We also got Paul Reiser as Burke, a higher-up in the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, overseeing this operation. And this was actually very early on in Paul Reiser's career. He would go on to have quite a bit of success, but this was, this might have been his first time being in a feature-length film, if I remember correctly. And one thing that I failed to mention in my Alien review that applies here too is that the company is a complete representation of many, massive companies that take advantage of people for profit. I mean, corporate greed is basically what it represents, and I think that will be relevant, sadly, until the end of time. On a production standpoint, Aliens is bigger and better than Alien. Fox yet again was hesitant to fund the project, thinking that the success of Alien was just a fluke. Well, they were wrong, again. Aliens got a $18 million budget versus the $11 million budget that Alien had. I'd say this was completely necessary since the scope of the project was just so big. I mean, this movie is just massive and epic and just everything that it should be. You have more characters, more xenomorphs, more set pieces, just fucking more of everything. Sigourney Weaver gives as good of a performance here as she did with Alien, and arguably even better. The team of Marines are also fan-favorite characters, every single one of them. I think everyone has their favorite Marine from Aliens. I know I do. You may not have much backstory for any of them, but they all stand apart from each other. You know, they have their own individual look and personality, and no matter how long it's been since you've last seen this, you remember all of them. I mean, you've got Sergeant Apone, played by Al Matthews, and a cooler sergeant you will not find. I mean, the dude just wakes up from his cryo sleep with a cigar in his mouth. He's got swagger, instantly memorable. Then you've got Corporal Hicks, played by Michael Biehn, who had just played Kyle Reese in The Terminator, so he found some success there. He's cool, stays calm under pressure, and he's got an instant crush on Ripley. And so did I. And of course you can't mention Hicks without Private Hudson, played by Bill Paxton. Hudson is the opposite of Hicks, really. He's the comic relief. He's very emotional. He does not keep his cool when things go to shit. I mean, Bill is just so likable in general that this character is still referenced and talked about today. An absolute fan favorite. Jeanette Goldstein plays Private Vasquez. She's the smallest of the team, but just as badass as anyone else. Come to think of it, the Alien franchise has always promoted strong female characters instead of the typical, damsel in distress shit. She's also a white woman playing a Hispanic character. Oh, 1986. I also didn't know that for the longest time, to be honest. So I guess you could say she's very convincing. It's also not her fault. Private Drake is played by Mark Rolston, and him and Vasquez are just, they're besties, I think you could say. They're always together, doing high fives, cracking jokes. They're kind of like a package deal. Then there's Lieutenant Gorman, played by William Hope. He's kind of the odd man out here since he's new to the team, and despite his high rank, he's super inexperienced. And though we may not get Jonesy the cat this time around through the whole movie, it was awesome to see him with Ripley early on. I mean, it would make no sense for her to bring him on a mission like this. Instead, though, we get Newt, played by Carrie Henn, a young girl that survived LV-426 by hiding from the aliens. She was very inexperienced at the time, but James Cameron wanted somebody unknown, and he saw something in her, and he was right, because she's fucking awesome. And Ripley, being a mom, is immediately drawn to Newt, and becomes really like a surrogate mother to her, and it adds a layer of emotion to the film, as well as some higher stakes, because you don't want to see a kid killed by a xenomorph, so you're constantly worried about Newt, even though she's already proven herself as a quite the badass little kid. I mean, I think the cast here is as good and maybe even better than Alien. The cast seemed to get along, and they spent a lot of time together, which I thought was really cool. Michael Biehn and Bill Paxton spent a lot of their free time together, from what I've read. Paxton really grew to love Lance Henriksen, and a lot of them would hang out with Carrie Henn because she's the only kid in the movie and she's adorable. Sigourney Weaver and Bill Paxton would color and do crafting stuff with her, which is also adorable. Oh, and here's a fun fact. All of the Marine character actors had to read the Starship Troopers novel per James Cameron's instructions so that they would understand what a space Marine might be like. Like I said, Aliens is a bigger, beefier film than Alien. That's not to say that I like it more, though, because I don't. It sacrifices a lot of the horror elements from Alien, but it doesn't necessarily lose the tension or the dread. And I think that's what makes this one of the greatest sequels of all time. It wasn't, let's do the same thing again because it did well before. It was, let's do something new. Let's take some chances. And I mean, not that taking chances always works, as later entries in the franchise would prove, but the chances here taken certainly did work. I mean, it's a natural progression, and everything works. Every fucking thing here works. And it's a total action film. There is, of course, still a fair amount of horror, because everything about these aliens is horrifying. But this time around, you have Marines with a ton of guns instead of space truckers with not a single gun in sight. Also, Queen Alien. Man, oh man. If you thought that the regular xenomorphs look cool, and I sure do, the Queen Alien just takes the goddamn cake. She just looks so cool. She's like 10 times the size. She has an awesome crown look to her head, and she's just the quintessential xenomorph, as she should be. She's the biggest and the baddest. She was done entirely with practical effects and some in-camera tricks. And for the time, I mean, it is masterful, and she looks great to this day. And I also love how the leader of the xenomorphs was the queen. I mean, it could have been a xenomorph king, instead, but that wouldn't be as cool. Her being female just fits the franchise so well, and it's honestly brilliant if you ask me. And the boss fight between her and Ripley, both being mothers, it's just so perfect. Also, does anyone have a Ripley Power Loader toy from the 90s for sale? I've literally wanted one of those since I was a little kid. I know NECA has made their own version, which looks 100 times better, but I still want that original 90s Power Loader Ripley. Anyways, this movie it's just perfection. I mean, it's sci-fi, it's action, it's horror, and everything works. Like I said, there's some dated CGI, of course, but it was 1986. Practical effects were basically used for everything that could be done that way, because that's how things should be done. And that's just a fact, not up for debate. It's almost a surprise even to me that I prefer Alien, to be honest. I mean, some of my favorite cinematic, elements are right here in this movie. Ripley's power loader, the Queen Xenomorph, and as much as I love Sigourney Weaver's performance in Alien, I think she's probably even better here. I'm giving Aliens, you guessed it, 10 out of 10. Like its predecessor, it's a timeless classic and has never been surpassed. Starship Troopers, as I mentioned earlier, is probably the next best thing, or the next closest thing to Aliens in my opinion, but it's still not that close. Cheers, guys.